ready to go. So let us start with the silent prayer. Amen. Okay, once again, Happy New Week to everyone. And I know it's really late for lots of, for a lot of you all that are watching at this moment. But I pray that you will be blessed with this, with these studies. So let's start. Yesterday, we spoke about false liberty and how it all started. We saw how it was applied first in heaven. And how Lucifer managed to continue spreading his lies. And his misinformation on earth. So through the years, freedom has been manifested in various forms of abuse. And spread throughout the world. We saw how freedom was promised to the world. In such a deceiving manner. And it continues today through the Declaration of Human Rights. So in today's study, we will see how the violation of the Declaration of Human Rights has brought about women's abuse and pornography. And we'll see that the same governments that promises protection these laws is the same government that uses the laws to abuse their power and gain. And with this, we see how Lucifer continued his government on earth. So I'd like to go through an article that was actually shared on the media broadcast a while back. And we know that our test is about gender equality and not about freedom. And we know how to fix women and the LGBTQ community directly. And as part of prophecy and and students of prophecy, and part of it it's important that we start understanding why these topics are so important to us. As we approach the Sunday law. Because we know we're not yet at the Sunday law. At the same time, many external things are happening around us. And there are steps that we need to be aware of that is actually leading us there. It's also important that we remember that we are part of prophecy. And that we actually contribute to society. And with so much abuse in this world, topics like pornography are not openly spoken in our movement. But it's an important topic that we need to understand because of women's abuse. An article that was actually forwarded a while ago by Elder Tess on the media broadcast this what was said. We have from a prophetic vantage point discuss the sexual revolution in context of the fight for gender equality. So while many feel uncomfortable with discussing sex, it is unavoidable in the context of our Sunday law test. Gender-based and LGBTQ+ equality all need an understanding of sex. To pornography and relationships as they have been in the external world. Because only then we find beautiful consistency in God's instructions on these points. In agreement with a prophetically based radical feminism. To speak about Hugh Hefner. There's much to be said about the impact of men such as Hugh Hefner. He was an American businessman founder and editor-in-chief of the world's most famous erotic magazine. And we know the name of that is Playboy magazine. These contribute to how we view this revolution and how society where we see radical feminism versus liberal and cultural, and freedom versus equality. How members of this movement view sex and abuse today. A champion for causes of equality through the 60s and the 70s, feminism, Hugh Hefner supported liberal feminism, abortion, LGBTQIA+ equality, and the civil rights movement. So we see he supported these things, and we will further down, we'll see why. And by so many today, he is still considered a leading part of sexual revolution. Freeing women from the expectations of a conservative society, and giving them a platform to express themselves sexually. But if we look at liberal versus radical feminism, we should question, is that what freedom looks like? So I'm going to start quoting some of a bit of an article. In the universally recognizable Playmates centerfolds, magazine defined an airbrushed and unattainable standard of feminine attraction and availability. That has made Playboy an irresistible target over the years. For its legion of critics who said it's a sexist, said it's a sexist objectifying rag. Led by a creepy old man whose legion of bunnies and bed partners never seemed to age even as he did. So we see that Hugh Hefner, youth represented feminine attraction and availability. Hugh Hefner proclaimed that he was the one that led the magazine and these young women. Remembering that Lucifer was also an important point for him was external beauty. So external beauty was also an important point for Lucifer. And today, as we look, we see how the expectation of beauty and beauty standards lead to abuse. Both men and women were expected to channel their sexuality into monogamous marriage. Okay. Okay. Both men and women were expected to channel their sexuality into monogamous marriage. Transgressing those strict pyramids could lead to social ostracism, loss of employment, or even diagnosis of mental illness. The stakes for women were particularly high. The only available options for feminine sexuality were good girl or bad girl. Women were expected to marry young, have several children, and follow their husband's lead in the bedroom. Anything else risked reputation, social acceptance, and marriageability. With the Playmate centerfolds, Hefner rejected these constrained vision of women's sexuality. He joyously proclaimed that good girls liked sex too. Hefner was motivated by his unwavering support for personal freedom, sexual or otherwise. Hefner's politics were progressive. And he supported much of the liberal agenda in the second half of the 20th century. Also, support for civil rights. So support for civil rights, gay rights, and anti-war movements. The liberalization of drug laws and liberal feminism all found their way into the Playboy worldview. Point, we see that Hefner supported women's reproductive rights, including access to birth control and legal abortion, as a matter of overall sexual freedom. And on the fifth point, of course, liberated women meant straight men could have more consequence-free sex, but reproductive rights were an important issue for feminists. Sixth point, we see that Playboy published information on the struggle for legal abortion with monthly updates on changing states' laws. So why would Hefner be so supportive of reproductive rights and abortion? So obviously we cannot imagine a pregnant woman a big belly, a changed body, working at Playboy. It was of Hefner's interest that women could abort. To continue sexual practices and keep their bodies in shape. So male privilege would continue and women's abuse also. And even though Hefner is known as the champion of liberty or personal freedom, although he donated a lot throughout his years, we know that this goes totally against equality and human rights for what they really should be. What Hefner really did was sexually exploited women over the years. after Hefner's deaths, questions like this took place. Hefner, a friend of feminists, didn't he start the sexual revolution that benefited women? Wasn't he a champion of free speech? Questions start to come up. And we see how society interpreted these changes, his doings. Second wave radical feminists provided a groundbreaking analysis of how porn reproduced and amplified an ideology that legitimized violence against women. Their work uncovered how women in porn were sexually exploited. And how all women were hurt by being reduced to the class of sex objects. Hefner often said that Playboy celebrated the beauty of women and allowed them to be sexual. But what he really did was hijack the radical feminist ideology that argued for sexual liberation by monetizing women's bodies and calling it a revolution. We can see this type of freedom. It wasn't about empowering of women. It was breaking down of women and empowering men. This is what Lucifer brought to the earth by propagating freedom or sweet liberty in his own way. He brought us to the world where freedom is above equality. He brought women to a point of abuse, controlled by governments and wicked society. And controlled by male privileges. So when we look of examples of misogyny, which is violence against women and which includes domestic violences, sexual harassments, we see how pornography plays a huge role. It's a psychological technique aimed at controlling women. Misogynists want women to feel inferior. Because these actions are primarily led by men. The rejection of feminine qualities in the workplaces, hobbies, at home, etc. Statements from Richard Dawkins like this: God is dead, long live man. For Dawkins and the male leaders of the movement of the Four Horsemen, have resurrected man as God, became superior to women. They had to, because they were evolving in different environments. The Four Horsemen, just like the men's rights and new atheist movements, keep shooting the same targets as the blatant misogynist. They keep saying the same things. All these things, where does women's equality stand? Because we know that the large part of society, this is the way they think. An evolutionary psychologist by the name of Jeffrey Miller writes, write more books, men give more lectures, men ask more questions after lectures, men dominate mixed sex committee discussions. And the same thoughts as society were held within our movement. And we did not think like that only by interpreting wrongly a thus saith the Lord. But we have a social construct. Society influences us as much as we influence them. Can you hear me? Andrea Dawkins, an Australian former politician, in 1974 book, Women Hating, relating to misogynist, uses traditional fairy tales to designate certain women to designate certain women as good, for example, Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, are inert meaning a lack of ability or strength to move or a lack of power. They are passive characters. So if we go back and recall Hefner's words, these good girls also like sex. Andrea Dawkins observed these characters that never think, act, initiate, confront, resist, challenge, feel, care, or question. No similar judgment is applied to men. So as she continues writing, she adds that women are powerful, are tolerated by misogynists, why did women use their power to reinforce the power of men? And to oppose feminism. So as women continue fighting for equality, we continue to see that boys today are more sexist than their grandfathers' generation. Particularly when it comes to sexual expectations. If we look at the article, Women's Equality and Pornography, it speaks on how hymen repair surgery has been promoted as freedom of choice. Feminist and power for women. And just like Elder Tess said, this is an argument that shows the rifts over what is and is not gender equality. Considering how many people, including powerful men, from industries and practices, the demean, including powerful men, profit from industries and practices, the demean, meaning causing a severe loss in dignity of and respect for someone. Those people continue to harm women. And that should not be a surprise that they lobby to use the branding of feminism and freedom to cover up. Beauty surgeries. Some see pornography as a form of freedom for women, which we know is false freedom. And that we know is false freedom. It's also this cult of virginity that is making its way back. Which is also another form of women's abuse. It might seem as human rights or liberating of them. Of old traditions. For the past 30 years in the Muslim world and certainly Western countries, conservatives have once again made virginity the ultimate moral barometer. And this barometer, it's used to measure air pressure in the atmosphere. Men, you see these men fantasizing on women's bodies, and this actually leads them to this abuse. If they're fantasized about these women, that's why he had them walking around naked in his Playboy empire. And more often than what we know, young men think it's okay to, or normal to, pressure women into sex. Graphic violence is a broad global trend. This trend ranges from the brutal opportunism often seen in the work of economic, and in environmental disasters. If vulnerable women are specifically targeted with violence or coerced into sex slavery. Coerced into sex slavery. See these graphic scenes of women who are beaten up during these porn scenes. We have examples of women being grabbed by their throats, slapping and pulling off of their clothes forcefully. That are often asked about these things that happen to them. Are never comfortable with what takes place. These women are never comfortable, especially when they find these women are never comfortable, especially when they find out that this is not freedom. Or revolutionary, it goes against true human rights. Joanne Angel, a self-described porn actress, says sexual violence is often promoted as an expression of women's rights. And she says, you can do a porn where a girl is getting spat on, where guys are calling her a dirty slut. And that's okay, she says. Exposure of porn now begins as young as 9 years old. An average age of 11. And we see that the largest group of pornography consumers being boys under the age between 12 and 17. We know gone are the days of hiding those magazines under the bed. Because today the most common form of pornography includes verbal and physical aggression against women. And nearly 90% of the movies that are freely available movies that people in this movement watch they think they have the freedom to do so. Pornography and domestic violence has a strong connection. Increasing sexual expectation directly linked to the use of pornography. So what can happen in relationships is your intimate partner expects you to do all these porn things that he watches. In the past few years, there has been a huge increase in intimate partners of rape of women from the age between 12 and 80. In the UK, there was a research which continues to show that nearly half of teenage girls are forced into unwanted sex. This is a sick and perverted mindset. Philosophy of rape is absolutely justifiable. That men have sex by force if women don't provide them their need. This is the world that porn has brought about, that porn has actually built. and post-millenniums are the first to experience it. And then we also still see these anonymous image board websites host boards dedicated to a wide variety of topics, one which is porn being videotaped on this site where children trafficking takes place. See how women are not safe. Leslie Bennett, a porn actress, says, is the instruction, rape is the practice. Battered women are the practice, battered children are the practice. During a speak out session, many told horrifying stories of being raped as children, by their fathers or their brothers, that often prepared for such events by reading or watching pornography. Catherine Brady, a participant, says, family was a middle-class, moral, religious family. Father had raped her from the time she was 8 years old until she was 18. Her father had raped her from the time she was 8 years old until she was 18. As a child, the only time she saw pornography was with her father. Pictures he showed her and told her it was okay for men to do whatever they wanted with women. Men like these and many others are those that are unable to relate to women as equal human beings. And most rape victims are girls under the age of 12 and half under the age of 18. Men feel uncomfortable in this movement to discuss sex. Avoidable in the context of our Sunday law. to speak about it. To educate more young people, even within our movement, that have this type of practice and behavior. Is that form of abuse that goes against human rights, true human rights. And we should never think that we have the freedom to do and behave the way we want. Why? Because this topic will continue until the second advent, and we won't stop speaking about it. There's much to be said and much to be learned about sexism. Inequality, false liberty, and all the abuses that it carries. Even though people say they are tired of listening to these topics, there's a movement continue speaking about it. We do not see the change within the movement or the world. And part of understanding the kingdom of heaven and its king is by knowing that it wasn't created on a sexist base or practice. As we come to a conclusion, heaven functions under the law of equality above freedom. And the one that makes us believe otherwise is Satan. Satan is the one that started breaking laws in heaven and distorting what sweet liberty really meant. And how it should be practiced. And only through radical feminism can we restore our Eden to Eden model and practice our midnight crime message. Radical feminists wouldn't play nice. And nothing is more scary than women who will do whatever it takes to change the condition of their oppression. May we think of the liberty that we really do want. Do we want to continue the false liberty that Satan gives to us in this world? Or do we want to hold on to the cords that give us the true liberty? It is a dangerous place to try and test and to see what the world has to offer. As much as the struggles that we have in our daily lives on earth, we need to hold on with our whole bodies onto the cords. Let us pray. Lord, I want to thank you for this opportunity that you had given me to present you. Help us as your children that we will know what is true liberty and what is false liberty. Help us to see that the world does not have anything to offer us. We have a heavenly place that is waiting for us. As we continue to struggle daily, help us to learn to love each other and take care of each other. Help us not to be so quick to judge one another. Thank you for this movement. Take care of our leaders and strengthen them day by day as they lead your flock. Pray for a blessing, for a continuous blessing on this camp meeting. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.